What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? When an unhappy client threatens to go hire a better lawyer, they don't seem to get that this isn't a threat when they aren't paying me. In my professional experience, it is exceedingly rare to be fired by a client you don't want to fire you. I've worked at a law firm for only a few months, but, yeah, every time a client has fired us, like 3 times, everyone at the office is like, oh thank God. When I was working customer service for a restaurant delivery service, not unlike DoorDash, I had a customer send in a complaint about hair in their food. The hair was sitting on top of the food. I checked their account, and they had 1 order on their account, which is a red flag. I checked their phone number and find multiple accounts, each other 1-2 orders, all of them complaining about hair in the food. I deny a refund, because the customer has actually used the same identical photo for the last order since they ordered the same thing. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again. Typical stuff that they always say. Eventually the customer gives up and ends the call, then immediately tries again. I get the support request, see who it is, then deny the refund again. She ends the call, then tries again. The person behind me gets the call. I tap the person on the shoulder and show them what I pulled up on my screen, and that person denies the refund. The next day she calls back and tries again and is outside of the refund window. So the customer demands to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor bans her from the service for multiple fraudulent refund requests. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again. So we agree. Great! I've managed service industry for years, and the number of people who make that threat having never spent a penny is baffling, especially this year. I swear it's once a week right now that after I tell somebody to leave and not return, they've threatened not to return. I've had to have police remove people and they'll scream about how they'll never return on their way out. Are the police dragging you out not enough of a sign that that's exactly what I want? What about the criminal trespassing notice you got? I was working as a consultant for a company. There was a bit of a competition between me and this guy. Company starts to have some financial issues, so I leave and start working for a client of theirs. Shortly after joining, they bring in this guy I was competing with at my old job. He was technically my equal, except now I was employed by the client and he was just a consultant. He was trying to one-up me during meetings, and my boss told him that decisions are made by the company, not the consultants. It felt good. I have kind of a similar one. I worked for Company A for 6 years before I decided to try something new. When I worked at Company B, I did some very specific things in a very specific field. Company A was having some issues with that topic and gave me a great offer to come back. My second day back, we had a meeting about that topic. My VP said I'd take lead on it. A director tried to pull rank, got all pissy, and said his team would handle it and that they didn't need help from my VP or his team. Our CFO stopped him, said Sardines was taking lead, and that if I needed help I was free to reach out to his team. I would have felt a little bad since apparently he didn't know this was the main reason I was brought on, but he was a total a-hat, so frick him. Reminds me of the "I'm the client now" line from Mad Men. I taught my 6th grade students about democratic processes, and we ran a simulation. Without fail, every one of my classes tried to impeach me. Should have played monarchy instead. As long as you don't have a guillotine in your class. Did your parents sign the permission slip for the execution? The paper cutter in the back of the room is pretty much a guillotine. Had an old boss who was a complete and total bastard. He was actually my boss's boss, and wasn't supposed to interact with us unless it was through our boss, but he just loved trying to make everyone under him squirm. The company had forced him to go to training twice because of how he spoke to people. One day, I get a call at home from him and he just starts unloading, cursing, name-calling, insulting over some technical issue he just found out about. After a couple of minutes, I just looked at my phone and hung up on him. The next day, I get called into a meeting with his boss, who basically wants to know who the frick I think I am hanging up on this guy. I calmly explain that no one gets to yell at me on my time, in my home, on my phone. You have to wait for me to be on the clock to pay me for that privilege, and I'll gladly take that money, if I'm busy being yelled at. I'm not busy with anything else. Seemed to work. This is my next big power move at work. I am working from home, so the next time my boss starts screaming at me, I'm just going to use my best teacher voice to say, when you can match my tone, I will be happy to have this conversation with you, and then I will hang up the call. I used to get a ton of angry customers at a car dealership service department I worked in. I started using this sentence. I'm a person. You're a person. Let's talk like people. Simple, but effective. worked 99% of the time. I had a rough childhood with a drug addict father. My mom struggled to make ends meet and my first job was paying for the mortgage. After several months of working, again at my first job, I finally had some money to spend on myself and decided to get a computer and a decent internet connection. At the time, the best internet I could buy as part of a dish combo package. I bought a dish and brought it home to install on the house. During this time, my dad was still living at home with us, but he was hardly there and my parents had all but separated at that point. My dad promptly asked me what I was doing putting a dish on his house. I let him know that I pay the mortgage now and I make the decisions on what we do with the house. I was young, but it was a very empowering moment for me. Guess revenge is a dish best served on the side of the house. One of my new employees came from a competitor who was, shall we say, not as put together as we are. Her former boss had actually called me to yell at me about poaching his consultants, which, in and of itself, is weird enough. However, a few weeks after she started, the dude rolled up to our office. He had apparently been calling her to get her to finish an analysis for him and she just ghosted him. I went to the lobby to see what the frick he was doing here. He started in on me again and then she happened to walk by. I didn't fully understand the conversation, but at one point he literally demanded she do this analysis. She just said, "Or what?" and waited a few beats before turning on her heels and walking away. I did the old hand on his back, point to the door universal symbol for leave or a large security man will make you leave. Never heard from him again. I've got a similar story. Many years ago, we fired a salesperson. She was a compulsive liar and unethical as hell. She was also living under the delusion that the place would fall apart without her, and that we'd be begging her to come back in a couple of weeks. So it didn't sit too well with her when we hired her replacement. His first day on the job, she calls him up to cuss him out for stealing her job. Later that day, she called corporate. I understand their conversation went like this. That bastard's trying to steal my clients. He's going around town telling people he replaced me. Corporate, he did replace you. Harass him again or any other employees and we're calling the cops. That finally convinced her that we weren't going to be begging her to come back. I worked at Walmart as a cashier, and the assistant manager there was a dong. He would insult everybody working there and forced us sometimes to do work above our pay grade. 6 months later, me and him got transferred to another Walmart that was just built and they needed to pick a manager, an assistant manager. Some random got manager, but I got assistant manager. I guess all the complaints on the assistant manager basically gave him a demotion. So one day he was ordering the other cashiers around, then I pulled him to the side and told him that if he kept pulling the same chute around he would be out of here. I haven't heard anything from him since. That surely must have been one of those moments where you're like, I'm so going to enjoy this. Not sure if this exactly fits, but my son worked at Walmart and they had a manager ordering the workers to do unsafe stuff that was against policy, and my son told him he wasn't going to do it. The MGR said, "You have to, cause I'm the manager." My son said, "Dude, that's like being the mayor of a trailer park. No one cares." MGR shut up and walked away. A coworker friend of mine was flying back from a sales conference in Vegas and he was able to upgrade to a first-class seat. We had this sales VP that was on the same flight. She was the snobby, entitled type with a full-time nanny and giant Mac mansion in the suburbs, and she generally treated people who worked for her like servants. She sees him in a first-class seat as she is making her way to coach and asks him how he got the seat. He used points to upgrade. As people are getting settled in, she makes her way back up to the first-class cabin and asks to speak with the lead flight attendant. She tells him that one of her underlings is sitting in first class, and that she needs to switch with him since she's higher on the corporate ladder. The guy can't believe what he's hearing, but she won't take no for an answer. Finally, he tells her she has to go back to her seat, or she will be escorted from the plane. She made a complete ass of herself in front of the whole first-class cabin. This one just makes me sad. People who really internalize that a corporate ladder has any relation to people's worth are only hurting themselves in the end. Wait until you meet military wives. I knew a military wife. She expected people to thank her for her service, and to think that is someone's boss rip. We had an our lady who was extremely power-hungry. She is walking around with the president of the company who flew in from Japan. She rushes him though the warehouse. Just spits out, "Oh, these are the warehouse guys, we don't have to stop and talk to them." He stops, walks over and starts talking to me about my last vacation, how buying my house went. You could just see her fuming behind him as we talked for almost 45 minutes. I've had multiple meetings with him, we knew each other really well. I don't think he liked her and drug it out on purpose, but I was thrilled to see her just standing there bored as hell. Sounds like the HR department at the warehouse I used to work at. It always blew my mind, because the place was a distribution center. The guys in the warehouse were literally the most important staff in the building, since we were the ones picking the orders and sending them to the trucks. But anytime you had to talk to them, they treated you like a nuisance. Frickers always had huge lunches and social gatherings and whatnot for the office people, almost never for us. I didn't feel much sympathy when a huge chunk of everybody in the office got laid off, and not a single order picker lost his job. That shows you who really counts.